My name is Sue McClellan and I work in the church engagement team at Embrace the Middle East. Embrace supports Christian partners as they work to transform lives and restore dignity for some of the most excluded and marginalised communities, where there's a need for refuge, a home, for healthcare, for education, for justice and human rights. We with our partners respond. Our goal is to contribute to a culture of human flourishing in a troubled region. We currently have 50 courageous, inspired, creative and skilled partners in the region. All are working to transform the lives of those most forgotten and on the margins. All are inspired by the gospel. We feel deeply privileged to work in partnership with them and honoured to be able to bring their witness closer to people in the UK. And we are so honoured to be partnering with Churches for Middle East Peace to bring you this webinar series. Churches for Middle East Peace, or CMEP, is a coalition of more than 30 national church communions and organisations working to encourage US policies that actively promote just, lasting and comprehensive resolutions to conflicts in the Middle East. CMEP helps church organisations, leaders and individuals nationwide advocate in a knowledgeable, timely, holistic and effective way to express their concerns about justice and peace for all peoples in the Middle East. CMEP uses three primary strategies to encourage UA's policies that promote just peace. So educate, elevate and advocate. And so our webinar series has been framed and informed by this book, A Land Full of God. The book aims to give Christians an opportunity to promote peace and justice in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, shows them how to understand the enmity with brief, digestible and comprehensive essays about the historical, political, religious and geographical tensions that have led to many of the dynamics we see today. All the while, A Land Full of God walks readers through a biblical perspective of God's heart for Israel and the historic suffering of the Jewish people, whilst also remaining sensitive to the experience and suffering of Palestinians that is all too real. The prevailing wave of Christian voices is seeking a pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, pro-peace, pro-justice, pro-poor, and ultimately pro-Jesus approach to bring resolution to the conflict. So thus far in this series, we have explored what Christian engagement in the Holy Land means. We've considered Christian Zionism and the theological considerations in A Land Full of God. And we've taken a look at the theme of God's chosen people and the family of Abraham. This evening, we're going to be attending to Christian concerns and the realities on the ground in Israel and Palestine. So helping us to do that this evening or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, is Carolyn Custis-James. She's an award-winning author who thinks deeply about what it means to be a female follower of Jesus in a postmodern world. Carolyn is adjunct faculty member of the MISO Seminary. Have I pronounced that right? Is it MISO or MISO? Missio. No, Missio. The Missio Seminary, sorry, formerly Biblical Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and a consulting editor for Zondervan's exegetical commentary series on the New Testament. In 2013, Christianity Today named her one of the 50 evangelical women to watch. She speaks regularly at church conferences, colleges, and for other Christian organisations, both in the US and in other parts of the world, and is a guest lecturer at various theological seminaries. She has also been interviewed by the Associated Press and National Public Radio. So NPR actually is something I really enjoy listening to here in the UK. So Carolyn, it's great to have you with us this evening. And then also we're going to be hearing from Carl Cristofalo, and he's the Senior Director of Advocacy and Government Relations and Special Advisor to the Executive Director at Churches for Middle East Peace. Carl was first introduced to Middle East advocacy work during a semester abroad in Cairo, Egypt. After graduating from college, Kyle spent 10 months serving with the Mennonite Central Committee in Bethlehem, Palestine, where he was seconded to work with Bethlehem Bible College. Most recently, Kyle served as the Programme Assistant for Middle East Policy at the Friends Committee on Legislation, where he helped coordinate lobbying work on Middle East policy and trained grassroots advocates on how to lobby their congressional representatives. So welcome to you, Kyle. And then when we've heard from both our speakers, we are very pleased to have the Reverend Canon Fowler Dagger with us this evening, who will respond to what they both have to say. He was born in Nazareth and is vicar of St. Paul's Anglican Church in the Galilean city of Shefa Amar, located between Nazareth and Haifa. He's also the Canon for Reconciliation at St. George's Cathedral and within the Anglican Communion, and as such is very involved in interfaith and ecumenical events and activities throughout the Holy Land. His ministry of building bridges between various faith communities within Israel is, as the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles put it, legendary. Canon Fowler will be responding to both what Carolyn and Carl have to say this evening as someone who lives every day with the realities of life on the ground. So welcome to you all. Now, for everybody who is watching and joining us today, please do use the Q&A facility for your questions. We will have time later on to answer some of those. But also as well, please do use the chat. Let us know where you are. It would be great to just get a sense of where people are located, both in the US and here in the UK. But that's enough from me. I'm now going to hand over to Carolyn. Thank you.
Well, I am honored to be part of this discussion, and I would consider myself a learner rather than an expert on this issue. I was really honored to be invited to write a chapter for this amazing book. And I wrote the chapter. It's actually has two titles in the book, one in the table of contents and one at the chapter. But it's the power of unlikely relationships or unlikely friendships. And my chapter begins in Oxford, England. I'm an American, and we were in Oxford because my husband was studying for his doctorate in history at the university, at Oxford University. We lived in university housing, and it was family housing, so it was like a mini United Nations. And that opened the door for a lot of interesting interactions. My chapter begins in Oxford, but it begins on January 17, 1991, when one of my Canadian neighbors pointed to the skies where there was this awful thundering of jets and yelled at me, "Those are your guys." And it was the launch of Operation Desert Storm and an American-led coalition launching their attack on Iraqi forces. And it was prompted by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, which was a major source of oil for America. And we were blindsided by the anti-American attitudes that burst out into the open in Oxford. And some of them were very close friends who withdrew from us. And they just looked at this war as a battle for the American automobile. And that was the beginning of being compelled to look at our own country from afar, which is so important, and it was eye-opening in numerous ways, but especially for what was happening in the Middle East and ultimately what was happening with Israel and the Palestinian people. So we were isolated for a while, and it led to conversations with two other men in our neighborhood who were also isolated. And one was a Muslim man from India, Ali, and he came from a very intensely persecuted part of India against Muslims. It was a very dangerous area for him. And it was interesting to talk with him because he was very conflicted over what was happening. He and his Muslim friends hated Saddam for his violence and abuse of people. But they were also very concerned about what was happening to the Palestinian people. And it just opened a door for him to talk to us and give us a different perspective on things from how he was seeing it. The other friend was Gabby, an Israeli former soldier in Israel's military. And he was somebody that the BBC and other networks would come to for commentary on what was happening in the Middle East. And he was very opposed to what is happening against the Palestinian people. And he gave us a completely different, we just did a lot of listening to these two men who had completely different perspectives on everything from what we as, patriotic Americans were thinking. And it was eye-opening and it was disturbing. And it was the beginning of seeing a lot of things from a different point of view. And my husband and I did a lot of listening to those two men, and their friendship meant a lot during that time as well. My own background is probably the mission field that this organization is reaching out to. I was raised in the church, in the American church, a very conservative thread of American Christianity. And so it had a very high view of the Jewish people. I grew up hoping that I would marry a Jewish man, and my husband has apologized to me that he doesn't have a drop of Jewish blood. He's a Texan, but anyway, it doesn't. Anti-Semitism just is hard to comprehend when you come from a culture where it's just the most amazing thing to be Jewish. And so that's what I grew up with. And Jewish Christians, Messianic Christians were celebrities, and that would come and speak in our church. And but it was a theology that I was raised on, was what I call escapist theology, where it was about evangelism so that more people would be raptured when Jesus comes, and it didn't have an outward focus. It was about personal spirituality, and really reduce the church's mission to evangelism and Bible teaching. And the hope that we had as Christians was not something we were offering to the world, but it was this to be lifted out of here. And so conversations with Ali and Gabby poked important holes in my Christian theology and made me ask questions. They raised issues about justice that I couldn't ignore. And it really was the beginning of a lot of questions for me. My ministry is focused on women and girls primarily, but it's expanded from that to be a bigger vision of what is God's calling, what is his vision for the human race. And I've spent a lot of time studying Genesis 1, and I've written about it in this chapter, because that's the vision that God has for the human race that he never gave up on, that Jesus came to restore. And it centers on being called to be his image bearers, which means our first calling is to know the God who created us and to reflect his heart for the world in how we interact with others and the things that we care about. And it's a calling that means we participate in divine revelation. People are supposed to find out what God is like by rubbing shoulders with us. Not that we are, siding and supporting violence in any part of the world, but that we bring justice and hope and purpose and meaning to people instead of everything else that's happening in God's world. So I've worked on that. And one of the things that has stood out for me is that in Genesis 1, when God commissions human beings to be agents for his kingdom in the world, that he blesses them, male and female, and sends them out into the world to be his representatives, to speak and act on his behalf, and to be agents of his heart for the world. And that he blesses human beings, male and female, as he sends them out. And I've called this the blessed alliance. And it's not that it would be nice for men and women to get along better. It's that men and women need each other to do God's purposes in the world. And you see over and over again examples that it's not, should we just get along better? It's that we need each other. And my chapter concludes with examples of Israelis and Palestinians coming together in individual relationships and realizing they have a lot in common as human beings. And they are beginning to partner on different initiatives. And one of the ones that showed up in the news at the time of all these wars was of a young Jewish man whose two older brothers were killed by a Palestinian bombing. And he decided to donate his brother's organs. And his brother's eyes went to a Palestinian man who could hardly believe that a Jewish man would be giving him sight. And the two of these men met and embraced and called each other brother. And it's happening in, at the micro level in just astonishing ways. And it's not that we should get along better, it's that we need each other. Israelis need Palestinians, and Palestinians need Israelis. And what if they joined forces? What would that do to the Middle East? So anyway, that's what got me started. And I'm still learning. I'm still asking questions. I'm still adjusting my theology. And I'm committed to that. I just know we're all learners.
Carolyn, thank you so much. We're going to go and hear from Kyle next. But Carolyn, I think you've raised some really interesting things that perhaps we shall return to in our discussion after we hear from Kyle. I really enjoyed reading your chapter in the book and was really moved by the accounts of the encounters between Israelis and Palestinians. So thank you. But at this point, I'm going to hand over to Kyle.
Thank you, Reverend Sue, and thank you, Carolyn, for getting us thinking about a lot of important and interesting topics. So I do hope we have time for conversation at the conclusion of our presentations. So as Reverend Sue said earlier, my name is Kyle Christopholo, and I am with Churches for Middle East Peace. And one of the reasons I'm speaking with you today is because I just returned now about 2 weeks ago from a trip to Israel-Palestine, leading some churches here in the US that engage with CMAP, and so have been able to see a bit of the realities on the ground. And I know only obviously a minuscule amount as I was there for about a week, and so I'm looking forward to hearing after my presentation from our respondent. But this year has really been pretty tense and devastating, especially for the Palestinian people in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. According to UN numbers, this is the deadliest year that we've seen for Palestinians killed by Israelis in the West Bank and East Jerusalem since 2006. With over 100 Palestinians, and the numbers are likely higher now, but at the last available statistics, over 100 Palestinians killed, including 26 children by Israeli forces. And those numbers were as of about a month ago. So I know in the past month, they've only unfortunately gone higher. So there's a lot of tension on the ground right now in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. And that, of course, affects Christians. It affects everyone, but the focus of our conversation today, I know, is on Christians in the Holy Land. So, I could feel that tension. I had been last in Israel-Palestine in 2019, so before the pandemic, and, even our trip, we were not able to, for example, visit Nablus as we had hoped. And that was because, there have been some attacks by Palestinians against Israelis, which have led Israel to impose significant sieges and lockdowns of whole communities, and that includes Nablus, where several of the Palestinians I mentioned have been killed by Israeli forces. So we were not able to go to Nablus. The woman from Nablus who was going to speak with us had to come and meet us at another location in the West Bank, and it took her several hours to get to us because of the sieges and lockdowns. It was hard for her to even get out and go to another part of the West Bank. This isn't her trying to travel into Israel proper, just she is a Palestinian trying to get from Nablus to a group of us in Ramallah. It took her several hours, which it should not take, but those tensions have caused these lockdowns that I've mentioned. We've also seen, an increase in attacks by settlers on olive farmers and other Palestinians, as well as vandalism on farms. And these are things that we heard while we were there, and speaking with Palestinians. This isn't necessarily new, but again, we've seen an increase in these types of attacks, and they come with, almost complete impunity for those that have committed them, especially by the settlers or Israeli soldiers. What's big news here in the US, and part of the job that I do at CMAP is relating to US members of Congress and government officials here. And, one of the big news items from this past year was the killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh on May 11th. So just a little over 6 months ago. And there was news that broke yesterday that the FBI here in the US is actually launching an investigation into her murder, because to this point, even though Israel has admitted that she was indeed likely killed by IDF soldiers, to date, there has been absolutely no accountability for those that killed Shireen. She was a celebrated and beloved journalist, Christian, who worked for many years for Al Jazeera, and I know was on broadcasts and in the homes of Palestinians from across the West Bank and also in the diaspora through her career. She had her press vest on. And she was killed in Jenin, which is one of those communities in the West Bank that has also been experiencing a lot of sieges and lockdowns this past year. And so she was killed as she was covering one of the IDF raids on Jenin just about 6 months ago. So we might see some changes there, and happy to talk, about that later if there are questions, but there has been a lot of attention from US congressional members, since Shireen was a US citizen. There is an extra layer of responsibility for US lawmakers to be paying attention. Still, I think there should be more, but we have seen significant engagement from members of Congress that have led us to the point where we now, do have an FBI investigation. We've heard from Israeli officials that they will not cooperate with that investigation. So, it'll be interesting to see exactly how that proceeds. We have been following closely the situation facing Masafer Yatta, which is a group of villages in the South Hebron Hills, where over 1,000 Palestinians face imminent expulsion from their homes. That was after a May Supreme Court decision by the Israeli Supreme Court declaring their land a firing zone. And so if these expulsions were to take place, this would represent the largest one-time transfer expulsion of Palestinians in quite some time. So we're following that closely. I think folks might have seen just within the past 2 weeks the election in Israel, which is slated to bring back Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to power. He won pretty resoundingly, and he did so by forming the most right-wing coalition that Israel, I think, will ever see or has seen to this date. I'm not an expert in Israeli politics, but he was able, he's still in the process of forming the government and expected to happen, and that's going to happen because of the religious Zionist groups that have gained considerable power. So you might have heard in the media Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has repeatedly over the years called for the killing and expulsions of Palestinians. The language has been somewhat neutralized over the past few months, I think, as Mr. Ben-Gvir has seen his political favor increase. It's been a bit moderated. So now we hear him talking about wanting to expel only those who are disloyal, Palestinians that are disloyal, or Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel that are disloyal. But previously, and even at his rallies, you've heard from his supporters chants of calling for Arabs and Palestinians to be killed. And he's likely to have the portfolio, in this next government that will include internal security. And so, which would give him considerable power over how Israel relates to Palestinians. So it's interesting here in the US to see that these right-wing parties that I mentioned, also have within their platform, and this isn't the purpose or the focus of this event, but anti-LGBT provisions. And so it's put the US government, and I don't know what this will do for the UK government, but it's put the US government in an interesting situation where we have actually seen some criticism of this new of some of these Israeli political parties, not because of how they treat the Palestinians, but because of some of their social beliefs. So we'll have to see how the Biden administration will relate to this new Israeli government. I think even very pro-Israel politicians in the US that are from the Democratic Party tried to sort of hint to Netanyahu that including some of these very right-wing groups would prove problematic and difficult for some US politicians to relate to. So, of course, he has to do that in order to maintain, to get back to power, but we're watching that as well. And we don't really think, the US just had our elections, and it looks like, the Senate will remain in Democratic hands and the House will go to Republicans, but it's not likely overall to really change the tenor of our engagement with Israel or Palestine. There might be some small changes, but nothing significant. So I think, if we're zeroing in sort of on the Palestinian Christian community, and of course, I'm looking forward again to hearing from our respondent, who knows much better than I do, who is living that reality. But the general uncertainty certainly is impacting the Palestinian Christian community, who is already in a vulnerable position as a small minority community. The fact that there isn't really any movement toward a peaceful resolution of the conflict. The Israeli government has been in transition now for several months, still is in transition, and it doesn't look like it's transitioning to anything that will be helpful. But then there's also the realities of a very unpopular Palestinian Authority, where there have not been elections in quite some times. So that really does, I think, put from what we've heard, Palestinian Christians in an incredibly vulnerable situation. We've also seen an increase in attacks against Palestinian Christians, against clergy, and I'm talking, within the old city of Jerusalem. There have been, over the past year, anecdotally from what we've heard from our contacts on the ground, attacks against Christian clergy as well as Christian properties throughout the the old city of Jerusalem. We know that on December 28th, so right after Christmas, when many folks in the US and Western world will probably be still thinking about family and celebrations and not really focused much politically, there's going to be a hearing within Israel to move forward with the expansion of an Israeli national park that would encompass several Christian holy sites on the Mount of Olives. And again, that we think is part of a pattern we're seeing of trying to really change the character of Jerusalem, so that you don't see the Christian community as being part of Jerusalem. We're also watching the 10 of Nations. I don't know, some of you joining this webinar maybe have been there yourself or are familiar with the 10 of Nations and Dawood Nassar. The Nassar family has owned their property near Bethlehem and have documentation of owning that property since the Ottoman times. But their land is in Area C of the West Bank, and so they have to re-register that land. And they've been now in a decades-long legal battle with Israel, at first saying that it was state land, and the Supreme Court saying that the Nassar family had the right to go through this re-registration process. They've been in this limbo with their hearing being postponed several times. It was supposed to happen in October. They've now pushed it back to November 21st, but this, the 10 of Nations is now in between several settlements. And so if their land is declared state land and they're forced to vacate, it would be another instance of a Christian community being removed from a part of the West Bank where they hold, I think, a lot of respect and have been, like I said, for for centuries. So I'll stop there for now, but looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Kyle. There was, again, a huge amount there for us to think about and consider. And for any of us who have travelled recently to Israel and Palestine, will be able to testify to the fact that the situation there is deteriorating and tensions are rising. But of course, it's all very well hearing from those of us who visit. It's much better to hear from those who live there. So Canon Fawad, it's really good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I'd just be really interested now to hear from you and how you respond to everything that Carolyn and Kyle have brought to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Sue. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Kyle, for the wonderful presentations and words and paving the way for me to speak about the situation and what does it mean to be a Christian in the land of the Holy One. Actually, I prefer to call it the land of the Holy One, not the Holy Land. I don't believe in holy lands. In a land which full of holes. I don't know how are we able to speak of a holy land. It's a land of the Holy One, and we, the people who have kept the faith of Jesus Christ and his cause alive in this land, which makes it holy. Therefore, I always stress and I always keen when I have the chance to speak with friends and brothers and sisters from all over the world who come our way to see and to be able to encounter with the living stones of the land. Therefore, each time I say to my friends who come from the Western world, if you're interested in holy stands and holy shrines and holy stones, take as much as you want back home with you. We who have kept the faith of Jesus Christ alive in his land and his cause are the most important thing about the whole story of being a Christian in this land. Now, being a Christian is not an easy term in the land where it all started. People think that this is the land where you are able to express your faith and to live it to the maximum. Some people, majority of people, tend to forget that it is the most challenging task to be a Christian where it all started. First of all, when I speak of myself as a Christian, what comes first to my mind is our identity. And we do face an identity crisis, especially with young people. When we speak of ourselves as Palestinians, as Christians, as Israelis, and in my case, as an Anglican. So this whole identity crisis raises so many questions. An Arab, but not a Muslim, a Christian, but not a new convert, a Palestinian, but not a terrorist, an Israeli, but not a Jew, and an Anglican, but not British. This is who we are. We are a community of Arab Palestinian Christians who are proud of our heritage, of our tradition, of our language. We address God in his land in Arabic. I'm saying this because people tend to forget that we as Arab Christians are Arab Christians 620 years before the rise of Islam, because we are always connected with Islam and Muslims, which is not true, because not all Muslims are Arabs and not all Arabs are Muslims. We Christians trace back our origins to the very first Pentecost. We were there in Jerusalem in the very first Pentecost. Many of you Americans, Canadians, British were not there. I was there. So to speak of ourselves as Christians in the land where it all started is a privilege, but also is a big challenge. It's a very challenging task to reflect Christ, to reflect His teachings, to be able to hold on the values and teachings which our Lord taught in this part of the world. Not far away from where I live, in the city of Shafamar, is the Lake of Tiberias, where He said on the Mount of the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the peacemakers, because they shall be called the children of God." And I think only the children of God can be peacemakers. Unfortunately, in our world, there are lots of peace talkers, not peacemakers. We've heard a lot when it comes to governments, when it comes to politics, and unfortunately, as both of our respectful speakers did say, and I heard it from an older generation than mine, that those past couple of years are the most difficult, disastrous years, Nakba years, than the Nakba itself back in 1948. What we're living here in the state of Israel, with the rise on a daily basis of more and more extremist voices and extremist schools and extremist people, makes me feel so much anxious and afraid, to be honest with you, to see what has happened in the last elections of the state of Israel should open our eyes and should turn on a very big red light in front of each and every one of us. The terminology we are hearing, the approach on daily issues of the Arab Palestinian Christian community and Muslim communities within the state of Israel, and even some people are not, they don't want to speak anymore of the green line. This is for the extremist groups, the Kahanists groups like Ben Gvir and others, and Smotrich. They don't want even to speak of the green line. There's no such thing. It's they wanna erase all of that history, as if we're not here. We don't have the right to exist. We don't have the right to live. We have no right to do to practice even our the smallest minor things on a daily basis. We hear it, we feel it, we see it in the faces of people going on to work, coming back from work. My wife works for a Jewish company. Being there with Jewish colleagues who are very good friends with my wife, and I do have lots of Jewish friends, but you feel, you see, you sense that there is a change. And unfortunately, those extremist voices are more and more heard. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu is back to power. I don't know. As I told this morning, a group of doctors from the Jewish sector and Arab sector came to our church to discuss medical services which should be given more and more to Arab sectors, because when we speak of equality in a state which claimed to be an equal or a democratic state to all of its citizens, this is not true. We are treated, I used to say before, I'm treated as a second-class citizen. I should say nowadays third, if not fourth, if not, I don't know what kind of a class citizen am I considered in the state of Israel. Now, unfortunately, when I speak of myself an Israeli, I don't tend to hide this, because all of the Arab Palestinian Christians, Muslims and Christians, continued to live after 1948, have become Israeli citizens. I have, if you want, historically speaking, Semitic blood within me as an Arab, as a Semitic, more than any other Jew who was brought from Russia or from Ethiopia or I don't know from where. So to speak of us when we raise voices of peace and justice and equality and start accuse the state of Israel on certain practices as being anti-Semitic, this is something we don't accept, because I have Semitic blood more than any other Jew who lived in that country, which was brought from I don't know where, from that world into Israel in 1948 and in the years of 1967 and onward. So we have lots of fears. I mean, what concerns me now, the future of our young people. I mean, I am a father of 2 children. If my son came to me a couple of years ago saying, "Dad, I want to go and immigrate," I would burst in him or her and be so much angry to hear such words. Nowadays, I won't even dare to say to him or to my daughter, "Don't leave. If you see your future somewhere else, go ahead." I mean, what kind of a future we have for our young people, whom we see as a church, as the present and the future of our churches. But unfortunately, if you want to tell your people, "Don't leave," you have to give the alternative. You have to find them job opportunities, housing projects, living in a cities and towns within the state of Israel with more and more opportunities and being taken care of by the government, whom we pay for our taxes. As I said to one of the doctors this morning in my parish hall, how many exams do I have to pass as an Arab Christian in the eyes of the government to be called a loyal citizen? How many exams since 1948 up till today I have to pass in order to be considered as a loyal citizen? We as a church, serving the communities and the societies of our Arab sectors more than the government itself, through our institutions, through our hospitals, through our schools, through our so many ministries we offer to the communities. As I said also this morning, because it happened a couple of hours ago, we as a church have been doing your role as a government instead of you helping us to do both with the government and the church our role in order to save our communities. When we speak of our schools, unfortunately, less and less budgets. When we speak of our hospitals, see what's going on in Nazareth now with the Nazareth Hospital, with the Edinburgh EMMS Hospital, cutting more and more budgets for the first time in 165 years. Before the creation of the State of Israel, the English hospital turned off and locked the doors of the emergency room because they don't have the money to pay for their doctors and for their nurses, because Israel cut down budgets and financial resources to our hospital, the English hospital, but we have 2 other hospitals in Nazareth, the Italian, the French, and the English, and they are going through the same situation. These are the real day-to-day issues we have to tackle as a church. So for us, a church is not going to a Sunday service with nice liturgy, with nice colors. A church for us is to go out of the church door on a Sunday and to tackle those issues, to tackle the anger of the people walking down the street here near the church, telling me, "Father, I'm not able to pay my children's school tuition because I have no job. Father, I'm not able to live in full dignity as a human being with my family in the land where my ancestors lived." So you have to give answers to those issues. Nowadays, only also an hour ago, I had a youth meeting in my parish. We've discussed elections. You should see, you should listen to the fear in the voices of our young people when they've watched. Some of them did elect, and some of them, they are still under the age, but they said, "Father, what is this? What is the future? What kind of a future you promised to us? So I stand there still. I can't give answers. So it is very serious. And if the whole world does not wake up and do their share and be the prophetic voice in the faces of your governments and your parliament members and anyone who is able or to change and to practice more influence on the state of Israel, they should do it. We can't do it by ourselves. Therefore, I always say to all of our brothers and sisters around the world, we are here, your ambassadors, yes, but you are our own ambassadors in your countries, in your communities, in your churches. You should bring more and more people to come and see what's going on. You should bring people to and visit Palestine, visit Nablus, visit Zababdi, visit West Bank villages and towns, and see how people are living there. For you, for me, in one way or another, as citizens of the state of Israel, to move from one place to the other is taken for granted. But for so many other people living in Palestine, to move from one Palestinian village to the other, it takes, as Kyle said with his friend, hours and hours. I was supposed to receive a Christmas tree as part of our decoration for Christmas season from a friend of mine who owns a company which decorates Christmas and sells Christmas trees. I thought with my pastorate committee this year to buy it from a West Bank in order to support them rather than buying it from here. I just received the call before starting this webinar saying to me, Father, unfortunately, I was turned down. The soldiers did not allow me to get out, although I have permission to leave as a Palestinian, but they asked me to go back to Nablus. He's from Nablus. So you are talking about a situation which is unfortunately going to nowhere. It's a vicious circle of violence, and violence and terrorizing people is not by killing them only. It is terrorizing people with the terminology which we hear in the Knesset every day. It is the kind of speech and words we are hearing when parliament members from the extremist groups and parties within the government of the state of Israel, like Ben Gvir or Smotrich or those Kahanists groups, when they tackle our issues and when they speak of us as people who do not deserve even to live in that country, in their country, and they forget where they came from. Some of them came from Russia or I don't know where. I was born here, and my great-grandfather was born here, and we've owned olive trees and olive fields for 2,000 years. I'm not saying we don't want others to live. I'm saying to my Jewish friends, this land has a place for all of us. This land has a place for the Jew, for the Muslim, for the Christian to live with each other. We live in a spot in that planet, in that world, which is dear to the heart of God. Why don't we make it a holy place instead of making it a cemetery for young people who are being killed from all sides, Palestinians and Jews, Israelis and Christians and Muslims. We can make it, but we need people with goodwill. We need prophetic voices. We need people who are not ashamed to say the truth and to work for the truth. We need people, as I said in one of the papers are presented recently saying our vision allows everyone here to enjoy the equality that God has given us by creating all of us in God's image. We all must believe that equality is the cornerstone of a just and lasting peace. Whatever the political situations or solutions proposed, we lived together in the past in this land. Why not live together in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so very much. So I'm going to open this up now to a conversation between the three of you. But just as we say here in the UK, as a starter for 10, just to kind of just reflect perhaps the three of you. Carolyn, right at the beginning, you were talking about your background and how that led you to have a very particular view of Israel and to hold it as very special. Of course, there are millions of Christians who hold a view that Israel should be supported almost unconditionally, I think. And so I just wondered, how would you suggest, the three of you, we engage with Christians who very sincerely hold that view without perhaps really fully understanding its consequences and its consequences on the ground? How do we engage people in a conversation to actually help them understand the realities that we've heard about this evening?
I'm happy to go first, but I don't know, Carolyn, if you wanted to, given you're more from sort of that background, but if not, I can go.
No, I mean, I'm really concerned with where the American church is right now. And I think what we've just heard, one of the things that just stood out for me is the centrality of Jesus and his teaching that has sort of been pushed aside here. And, you know, more political things are dominating. And we've lost the radical nature of the Christian gospel, the good news, and how Jesus' teaching overthrows all of this, you know, where it's putting the interests of others ahead of yourself. And, you know, it's about doing, I mean, Jesus was reaching out constantly to the people who were pushed aside. And I love it all the way through the Bible. There are non-Jewish people that are drawn forward into the major story of God's good news. You know, one of my favorites is Ruth, who was an undocumented immigrant in Bethlehem, and she brought a perspective on the Mosaic law that had been lost. You know, the law said, let them glean, but she raised the interpretation, feed them, which is a big difference. And I think, you know, we have to look again at what it means to follow Jesus. It's that basic. And I, like I said, I'm very concerned about what's happening here and the terrible division inside the church. Pray for us. But it's, you know, it impacts all of this because there's sort of a black and white way of looking at the world. And the world is not that simple. And the issues are more complicated. And, you know, the men we talked to during the Gulf War, the two men were disturbed by what they were seeing and the simplistic approach to dealing with problems between nations. But anyway, it's just, thank you for your presentations. My goodness, there's a lot to chew on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carolyn. Kyle, sorry, Kyle. Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
want
just briefly. I mean, I think, this is part of the work of Churches for Middle East Peace and trying to reach out to, U.S. Christians from across the theological and ecumenical spectrum. And so I think the tone and the technique that you take is important, because if you come in, and I don't want to discount, I mean, what we've heard, and we don't have time to wait, right? But at the same time, sort of doing it in love and doing it with humility, I think, is critical. And so, we have, and we're starting to relaunch some of these programs now. I won't say post-pandemic, but in whatever situation we are now, where, we bring Christians from Israel-Palestine to the U.S. to speak in churches, in universities, community centers, and we introduce some of, and not just in the echo chambers of the U.S. Christians who are already supportive, but we go to places where, they didn't even know that Christians were still in. That there were such a thing as Palestinian Christians. And so I think, you don't go in, and of course there are, like I said, a variety of techniques, but I think you don't go in with this idea that you have to convince that person to stop believing what they believe, but introducing them to a new reality and just letting them kind of figure out that, you can see this light bulb go off. And I'm not saying that people leave and say that they're no longer pro-Israel or whatever, they've given up their beliefs, but they start to question. They start to say, I didn't even know that there were Palestinian Christians. I didn't, they're often, I'm sure the Ken and Fuad, you've experienced this, where people ask you when you converted, or, like they didn't know that this is the place where our faith began, right? And so introducing them, I think it slowly starts to chip away and showing them that doesn't mean that they have to change their whole theology. It doesn't mean that they need to, give up everything that they've believed in, but expanding their knowledge and introducing them, whether it's trips to the U.S. or when we take trips to the Holy Land, or the land called Holy, then we make sure that they have time with Palestinian Christians, right? That they just don't go to the pilgrimage sites and not see anyone, but they actually meet the living stones, right? And that, I think, the transformation doesn't happen overnight, but that's sort of how you begin, I think, those conversations. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you. I've just been thinking as well, just listening to all of you speak about the interplay between religion and also politics, particularly geopolitics, and obviously, particularly the US's ongoing, very close relationship with Israel. I mean, do you have a view, any of you, and I'd be particularly interested to hear from you, Ken and Fuad, as to how you think that actually what we think is Christian belief is actually profoundly influenced by political expediency. Do any of you have any views on that?
If I understood well your questions, you mean that Christianity is influenced by policies of governments around the world?
Yes.
You mean
Western Christianity, very much, particularly Western Protestant Christianity.
Yeah, I think we have been injured deep inside by Western Zionist evangelical Christianity, even as much as the Nakba or the loss of our lands and homes in 1948. we have suffered as Christians in the Holy Land, the land of the Holy One, by Christian groups who came and said to us, "How dare you speak of Israel, a promised land by God to a chosen people?" I mean, I don't know, and I've tackled and I've faced such questions even in so many events. Some people left the hall or left the room where I spoke because I did speak clearly about what has been going on in Israel and how Israel is treating Palestinians, how the Jewish people who have experienced massacres and Holocaust, the oppressed of yesterday become the oppressors of today. And I say it loudly. I'm not afraid to say this. The oppressed of yesterday become the oppressors of today. And we as Arab Christians, we as Arabs paid the price of what the Western world did to the Jews. I didn't do it. Just the opposite. Jewish communities lived in Iraq, lived in Lebanon, lived in Syria, lived in Palestine side by side with the Arab Christians and Muslims, historically speaking. I studied in Lebanon. I did my training in Lebanon back in the early 90s. And Lebanon for us in the Middle East is a pearl. I mean, it's a place where nature, where the beauty of nature, where so many religious sects live together. But to see a country which has gone into a civil war for almost 25, 26, 27 years of civil war, and see how this land and how this country was damaged, and the church is trying all over again and again to raise up with its people, to see how the policy of the state of Israel when it comes to Lebanon, an oasis of democracy, real democracy in the Middle East, of how they've been treated, justifying that by also an extremist Islamic Shiites, Hezbollah groups, and attacking and destroying and making the lives of people miserable, like they're doing in Palestine. Young people are being shot dead. Shireen Abu Aqli, whom I've known personally, I've known her for so many years, to be shot in a cold blood, as we say. Where is the Western world? What kind of a God is this, who promised such a land for such a people who had been called to carry out the message, not to be chosen and to be exclusive, rather than being inclusive. I have no problem with the word chosen people. We are all chosen by God for a certain message, for a mission into the world. But unfortunately, my fear, when the Christian church repeats the history of the Jewish people way back from the Old Testament up till today, by embodied in such policies and sick theologies and bloody theology, not theology of the blood, as one said to me. I said, this is a bloody theology. This is not a theology of the blood of salvation. Yes, we did suffer very much from such extremist groups, but I always tell them, come and see, come and meet us. Know that we do exist. As Kyle said, many people don't know that even we do exist at all as Arab Christians. So therefore, I do call upon our friends all over the world to come and see, come and worship on a Sunday with our local churches, meet with the local parishes, with the local parishioners, and speak with them, experience their lives ask them questions, experience how they live, and be ready to listen to their story, our story.
Thank you. Yes, so important. Now, I'm really aware about the time, because we actually have really come to the end of our time. However, because we started late, I would sort of beg your indulgence for all of you joining us. And if we could just hang on for a few more minutes so that we can just explore some of the questions that have been coming up in the Q&A. Thank you so much for those of you that have popped a question into that. I'm going to just have a quick look through here and see if we can just group some of these together. And then we might be able to get quite a lot of ground covered. One of the themes that's coming up in this is how Christian leadership and communities in the US who are having a concern for Palestinians, how are they engaging with the Jewish community in the States? Carolyn and Carl, perhaps you could speak to this.
I don't know. You know, I think there are a lot of American evangelicals who just want to go on a tour to the Bible lands, but I don't know. I think the views that are what I'm seeing is more political than theological. You know, pro-Israel, and it's not nuanced. Yeah. So it's, what makes a difference is we can decide what our views are, but when you look somebody in the face, a real person who lives in that situation, or it's a different question. You can't be black and white about views. You have to wrestle, and I don't think there's enough of that going on. It's discouraging. Yeah.
I would just say very quickly, and if I don't know, as well, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that oftentimes in those conversations, Palestine isn't mentioned. There is a lot of engagement between US Christian leaders and Jewish communities in the US. And of course, there's a lot of joint work that they do as leaders in their respective communities. And I think for many years, there's just been an unstated agreement that they won't talk about Israel-Palestine because there might be a difference of opinion on that particular topic. So I think that has been an area of interfaith engagement in the US where at times, again, there's been some more quietness. And I'm not saying that is the case in every instance, but I think we've seen that, and there might be some shifts that are happening, but historically, I think that's been at least one route that's been taken.
Yeah. Okay.
The ones asking the questions are actually younger people. And, we're looking at right now, an exodus from the church. And it's not that they are abandoning Jesus, they just aren't finding him inside. That's what they're saying. And they're deconstructing their faith, their Christianity, which is a healthy, that's what's happening to me when I'm listening to these two men talk about what's really happening and the issues. And it's not as simple as what I had understood. It's eye-opening, and you have to ask questions of your own beliefs.
Yeah, sure. I've also got a question here well, a couple actually to do with the recent elections. So the first one is, are secular Jews inside Israel supporting the extremist settler groups and political parties? And also, I think it would be very helpful to have some clarity on the Arabs' right to vote in Israel's elections, and whether all Knesset members have to swear allegiance to the Jewish state, because the state law clearly says that the right to exercise national self-determination in the state of Israel is unique to the Jewish people. Farhad, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I've seen that question, and it's very important to give an answer. Yes, we as Arab Israelis, as Arab community, Muslims, Christians, and Druze who carry an Israeli passports, and all of us have become, as I said in my presentation earlier, have become Israeli citizens after 1948 automatically. Yes, we do have the right to vote. And nowadays, in the recent elections, we have 10 parliament members. We were almost able to get the third Arab party into the parliament with other 5 chairs, 5 members, but unfortunately they've missed 100 whatever votes, so they did not succeed. But yes, we do elect and vote for the Knesset. 10 of our Arab 10 Arab parliament members are there in the new government, and of course they do have to what do you call it, Reverend Sue? I don't know what do you call it in English. They made it this morning. Today they had to do their what do you call it, allegiance, or the forgot
oath of allegiance, would you call it?
Yes. They have to do it, and as parliament members, they do, even though they are Arabs. Of course, they have to do it. But for us, this time, this year, to encourage people to go and vote was a big challenge. People just felt so hopeless and helpless. To be honest with you, I didn't do it loudly, but I did encourage people, and I had to call some people, please go and vote. Practice your right to have members in the Knesset, at least if you feel that they can't do anything. But we need to have our voice as it were, and our shouts in there in the Knesset. We can't really not have anyone in the Knesset, because people said, what shall they do for us? They can't do anything. They will be attacked every time, and they will not be able to do anything or change anything. I said, no, we should go and vote and practice our right to have parliament members from the Arab sectors. And thanks be to God, we were able to have 10 of them in the Knesset this time.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really handy, actually, looking at you on my screen, because your clock behind you rather, I can see what the time is, and of course for you it's almost 11 o'clock at night.
That's fine. What is it all?
So I think we really do, because we have gone over time because we started late, we do need to be drawing this to a close. One of the things that's been really lovely in what I can see in the questions, and the several questions all alluding to the same thing, that people want to offer their solidarity and their support, and asking what can we do to encourage the Palestinian Christian community. What can we do to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians? I think it would be fair to say that we've heard really loud from you, Fuad, that please come and visit, come and see. Of course, that's not always going to be possible for everybody. But organisations like CMEP, like Embrace the Middle East, we both produce resources and ways of finding out about more of what is actually happening on the ground. And encourage.
I may
Sorry?
Sue. Share the story. Tell
Exactly.
the people that we met with an Arab Palestinian Christian who spoke to us, who shared his experience. Do it in small circles, in your parishes, in your homes. Start in small circles. We don't have to. We're not going to change the whole world like this. But it takes people to be courageous to share the story and to tell the people that there are Arab, Christians, Palestinians, Muslims, Christians living together who kept your faith and my faith alive for 2,000 years. We don't want you to come back into this land and find those churches turn into museums in a couple of years. So your support is desperately needed. Share the story, come and see, come and meet, and share your experience. Sorry, but
Yes.
thank you.
No, I mean, absolutely brilliant. And I think the whole point about sharing stories is really important, because we can end up arguing theology, we can end up arguing politics, and it can become like a game of ping pong. You know, it just goes from one side to the other. Whereas when we share our story, that's our experience and our reality. And, you know, that has to be honored. I mean, some people may choose not to, but, you know, if we're telling our stories, that's the truth that we speak and as we've understood it. And that has to be honored by those who hear our stories. So, yeah. So this has just been wonderful. Thank you, the three of you, for your time, your thoughtfulness. I would love to be able to talk some more, but unfortunately, it is time to close. I hope nobody will mind this, but I just feel it would be really nice. Canon Fuad, before we leave, could you just bless us and send us on our way as we go off into the rest of today, whatever it is we're doing. Those of you that may have an afternoon to get on with, those of you that will be going to bed. Thank you.
I'm going to give the blessing in the language which our Lord spoke. Arabic, Aramaic, is Hebrew, are the same language, same Semitic languages. So if I may say it in Arabic. وسلام الله الفائق كل فهم يحفظ قلوبكم وأثاركم في معرفة ومحبة الله الآب وابنه ربنا يسوع المسيح وبركة الله القادر على كل شيء الآب والابن والروح القدس تكون معكم وتستمر فيكم من الآن وإلى أبد الآبدين. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so much for joining us. There will be a recording available of this tonight, so you'll be able to go back and watch it again, or please pass it on to your friends who were not able to join us, because it will be up on YouTube. So thank you all so much. Good night.
Thank you.